This is the Soccer Media Podcast, our weekly look at the soccer media business and the business of soccer. We're presented by Soccer America and produced by the John Shrader Media Group. I'm John Shrader. With us this week is former MLS and Liga MX national team player Herculez Gomez, who plies his trade these days at ESPN. You don't have the World Cup. You don't have Major League Soccer. Do those things matter? And how do you deal with those things in the presentation of what you guys do every day?
Well, as you know, and I'll share a little insight with the viewers. If you don't have rights, it's frustrating as an on-air talent. You don't have the perks. When you have rights, you're behind the curtain. You have all the access to the material you need, the players, the coaches, the teams, the fields, the environment, the ambiance. You're just the extra setting. That's the show. When you don't have that, you've got to paint the picture of the show. You've got to try to get into the heads of the players without talking to the players, the coaches without talking to the coaches. You don't have that access. You don't have the studio set in the stadium. But what I've learned from ESPN is you don't need that. What I've learned from the worldwide leader of sports is you're still ESPN. You're massive. So you have the audience, you have the platform. Let's paint the picture. And what I mean by that is we didn't have World Cup qualifying rights. And I think we were by far the best coverage.
Our full conversation with the man they call Herc coming right up. Did you know your Soccer America membership includes a daily soccer television schedule delivered to your inbox every morning? It's something I've depended on for years to follow games from all corners of the world. For a 30-day free trial of Soccer America, and it includes all the e-letters, go to www.socceramerica.com/free trial. That's socceramerica.com/free trial. As is our custom, Mike Waitala, the executive editor of Soccer America, is with us, and it certainly looks like you are on the road, sir.
That's right. I'm in Tampa, Florida, and my hotel room just got back from the U.S. national team press conference. They'll play Uruguay tomorrow, so we won't know the score when we listen to this. I mean, but yeah, they're coming off a game against Paraguay. They won 2-1. We talked about it on the last show. Gio Reyna made his comeback, and it went fantastic. He scored a goal early on, and then he set up the second goal by Balogun. And yeah, that's the big news, and we'll see if they can keep this undefeated streak up.
Just for the record, we're recording this on Monday. They played Paraguay over the weekend, play Uruguay on Tuesday night in Tampa, where you're sitting. And I guess if there's anything you can say about the Reynas in the last year or two, is that they sure know how to be dramatic. Gio Reyna gets back in the picture, gets invited to the game, and 4 minutes into the game scores a goal. So that is pretty dramatic.
Yeah, and he just turned 23 a few days before the game, so young player. And, he did show that he's got a special quality that, he's got to figure out how to get more club playing time. But I think he pretty much proved that he could be an asset.
Speaking of club playing time, and I guess it's going to be another year or more, but Major League Soccer has decided that their playing time is going to come on a different calendar. Can you give us a little bit of an idea, Mike, of what the sort of background of that is and how that's going to work?
Absolutely. It's the biggest change in 30 years of MLS. They're going to switch to a summer-spring calendar, the way that almost every league in the world does it. It's a risky move in some sense because playing through the summer is when, crowds like to go to soccer games, and they're going to have games in cold weather places in November and December. But it's trade-offs. It's all about trade-offs. Paul Kennedy wrote an excellent column in socceramerica.com about it, outlining the trade-offs. And a big one is to coincide the international transfer windows with the offseason. That's a huge one.
So they get the off-season trade-offs, and they don't have to compete with smack dab in the middle of the National Football League regular season for the playoffs. And so they're just banking on that they can make this work through let's say December, January, and February and survive?
Yeah, they might not play in January, but the two big positives are that the international transfer windows coincide. So instead of buying a player who's coming in mid-season, doesn't have a preseason here, tries to join the team, and also trying to get a player in the MLS offseason when teams in Europe don't want to sell players, even if they're free agents. That's not a good time to get players. Also, it enables MLS teams to sell players at a time when clubs will want to buy them and not sell a player in the middle of their season. That's huge. And, that could make a lot more money for the league and obviously bring more players here in a time at the right time. The other positive is that the most important games that MLS has, which would be the playoffs and MLS Cup, that's going to be in May without the competition of college football and NFL football.
I mean, you make it sound like it's a decision that should have been made long, long ago. Why did they wait 30 years?
Well, I think giving up those summer games is a big deal. It'll be interesting to see what happens in November and December. If teams aren't winning, what drives fans to go to games? Are they still going to go when the weather's that bad if their team's not playing that well? In other countries, obviously they do it, but you tend to have a longer history of loyalty to clubs. And so that's the big players. I mean, it's wonderful to go to soccer games in the summer, right? And especially for those of us that don't live in cold weather places,
Yeah.
if Philadelphia crowds, maybe it doesn't matter to them. They're used to that.
Speaking of Major League Soccer, a gentleman who played in Major League Soccer, played in a Mexican league, now talks about soccer around the clock practically. Herculez Gomez will join us in just a bit. And as nearly all of these people have been in the soccer business in this country for a long time, Herculez as well.
It was really enjoyable to watch Herculez make it as a professional, because it was at a time where there really wasn't a pathway for the kind of player that Herculez was. He wasn't you had this tradition of going to college, of being in the ODP, of, high priced club soccer. He ended up going to Mexico to prove himself, and then went back to MLS, back to Mexico, where 1 year he was tied for leading scorer. First time an American did that abroad. When we did a story on him early in his career, he grew up in Nevada. There was a quote from his coach who noticed that Herculez and about 3 or 4 of his friends would be at practice an hour and a half before it started. And the reason was they only had one parent available who wasn't working, could drop them off, and that was the only time he could drop them off. Herculez overcame a lot of challenges that youth soccer presents. That's changed, thankfully, in a good way, because now you have the MLS academies that look for kids like Herculez wherever they are, and provide opportunities for them. That doesn't mean some don't still slip through the cracks, but what Herculez pulled off in his career is truly tremendous. And obviously his post-playing career has been fun to watch, and look forward to hearing what he has to say today.
Yeah, and as we're about to be reminded, there are few people in American soccer who understand more deeply that unique relationship between Mexico and the U.S., Mexican-Americans, Mexicans and Americans who are into soccer, and he can come at this with knowledge and credibility, and it's pretty interesting. Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, and he's coming up next, as promised. Thanks, Mike. We'll see you next time.
See you next time, John.
And before we hear from Herculez Gomez, let's hear Mike's trivia question.
Welcome to the Soccer America Trivia Quiz. There have been 22 Men's World Cups. One of those World Cups did not have a final championship game as we know them today. Can you name when that was? Stay tuned for the answer later in the show.
When you hire a former player to be a broadcaster, you want a former player to be outspoken, to be someone who gives you the straight stuff. And I don't think there's anybody who Herculez Gomez has ever worked for who didn't get the straight stuff. And we're going to get it here today. And Herculez, thanks so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Anytime, John. Thanks for having me.
So you go into broadcasting, Herculez, after a long career as a player, and 17 years between the U.S. and Mexico. I guess to get it started, why broadcasting? Why media? What made you think this would be the next stop in your adventure?
Good question. It wasn't the next stop, or planned to be the next stop.
Mm-hmm.
I was enjoying a very fruitful second act in Mexico. I was having a lot of fun. I was doing this crossover of living and playing in Mexico and playing for the U.S. men's national team, and then kind of being in this Major League Soccer Liga MX U.S. men's national team Mexico rivalry. and it was fun. It gave me an opportunity to, I guess, get out there a bit more in terms of interviews. And I've always been very active in social media, a pioneer in social media, if you will. I don't want to date myself, but that's what it was. I was I guess one of the first base of players, or I should say generation of players that started dabbling in social media, and it gets your name out there and it gets your personality out there. And as I would come and play against Major League Soccer teams, it was a fun back and forth banter, especially with the Seattle Sounders, and it just got your name back out there a little bit more. And same in the Mexican circles when I would represent the U.S. men's national team playing in Mexico, which was very taboo. You'd get out there a little bit more. So I was starting to get known. The idea was to go into the administrative side. I really had an eye for being a sporting director, a club president. I know that's something that I thought about. And in fact, this tournament that I was mentioning against the Seattle Sounders, we played them a couple times, quarters and semifinals of the CONCACAF Champions League. They would come down, we would go up to Seattle, and I would have conversations with, at the time, Chris Henderson, who was working for the Seattle Sounders. And Chris, very great guy. Still keep in touch with him today. Every once in a while through social media or that I see he's made a move. And this time he asked me what I want to do post soccer. And I turned around and looked at him. It was before a game, field recognition. You're out there kind of getting to see the field and whatnot. And I said, I kind of want to do what you're doing, Chris. And I don't know how others would have reacted. Chris looked at me and said, how about this? Next time you're off in your off season, come down to Seattle, shadow me, get to know what I do and see if you like it. And that stuck with me. And that was the plan. That was the plan. And somewhere along the lines of coming back to Major League Soccer in my later years, I believe it was 2016, I was with Toronto. Major League Soccer had like a playing game, and it was Toronto FC versus the Montreal Impact. We would go down to Montreal, we get eliminated. That was on a Wednesday. The weekend playoffs start, the actual playoffs. I got a phone call from Major League Soccer production asking me if I'd like to go down to New York and work with them in studio for that Sunday, Saturday, bunch of games. My wife goes, let's go. Free trip to New York. Why not?
There you go.
Went down to New York. I did it. Felt fun. It was cool. Kind of a conversation like we're having right now. And before I knew it, that off season, I'm in Mexico with my wife. That's where I met her, and we're visiting the in-laws. I get a phone call from producers in Los Angeles asking me if I can go down to LA and meet with some executives at Fox. Spoke to my agent at the time. They set up a meeting with one of the executives at Fox, David Neal, had a conversation with them. And after 10, 15 minutes, he says, I like you. What are you doing this summer? Breaks out some dates. And I said, well, I'm playing, I think, Major League Soccer. He goes, well, no, you guys are going to take a break. Come down and work for us, Fox Copa America. And I said, sure. We set it up. I went down and worked Fox Copa America. And I'll never forget it, John. First day I did studio. Second day, I was going to call a game. Never called a game in my life. It was going to be Panama, Bolivia, the game in Seattle. I'm calling it off monitor in Los Angeles. I do the game with Mark Followell, who's a play-by-play at Fox and also does the Dallas Mavericks games. Great guy. I felt, adrenaline kick in. It was fun. But in the back of your mind, you're like, how did I do? How did I do? I show up the next day to work studio, and it's a doubleheader, and Mexico, Uruguay are playing that day. And it's the first set of games, and I do those first set of games, like the preview, whatnot. The executive that hired me for this competition comes down, and he goes, hey, tomorrow you got a game. I said, yeah. He goes, you're not doing that anymore. Stay here. Tomorrow you come back here. And in my mind, I'm like, oh, my God, I was so terrible. They don't want me to do any games anymore. And he's like, do you understand what I'm saying? And I said, yeah. And he goes, okay. And he walks away. And the producer, Shaw Brown, comes to me and he goes, what happened? I was like, well, David wants me to not do games and stay here in studio from now on. And he goes, that's great. I said, is it? And he goes, you want to be here. You want to be here. and I worked the rest of the Copa America for that break. Went back with the Seattle Sounders, and well, actually, before I worked the Copa America, before I went back to the Seattle Sounders, excuse me, David Neal comes back down and he tries to convince me to retire, not go back to Seattle and just work the rest of the tournament. And I thanked him for the offer, but I didn't want to retire that way. I knew that it was going to be my last year, but I didn't want to go out like that. So I thanked him for the offer, said we would stay in touch. And then it just became a situation where the Seattle Sounders allowed me during the FIFA fixture dates to kind of leave the team like if I was being called up by the national team. Instead, I was being called up by Fox to go work the national team games. And that's pretty much how it happened. I knew I was going to go into this route post-playing career from there.
And then you win the championship that year and then retire, and then you go work at ESPN. Is that sort of the short version of what happened after that?
Pretty much. Respectfully for Fox, they were dragging their feet during the contract negotiations, and my agent thought it would be a good idea to set up a car wash. I ignorantly said, what do you mean a car wash? And explained the process of a bunch of interviews. And it's like a car wash. You go from one to the next, and you do a bunch in one day. I did like 8 different interviews here at ESPN in one day. And as I'm coming back from Bristol, Connecticut, Hartford, Connecticut, on a flight to Seattle, I get a phone call while I'm still on the plane from the producer, Shaw Brown, asking, what are you doing at ESPN? I'm like, how do you know ESPN? He's like, don't worry, how I know you're at ESPN. What's going on?
It's a small business.
Yeah. And, Dave and Neil and the people at Fox were very, very honest and gracious with me. They told me to take the ESPN deal because they couldn't match the days. They couldn't match the offer type of deal that it was going to be good for me. And I did that. And it's kind of changed the course of my life. We are very happy with ESPN, and that's kind of what happened. I knew I was going to go to ESPN before the final whistle of MLS Cup was blown.
So at ESPN, you do ESPNFC in its forms. Sometimes you do Football Americas still, correct?
Correct. I do. My 9 to 5 is actually Ahora, Nunca. It's a first take type of show, if you will, in Spanish. It's a 2-hour window, and it's giving me the every day, Monday to Friday. It's a 2-hour window, and it gives me the opportunity to talk other sports, which I've loved. I'm in this crossover role. So with Ahora Nunca, I've gotten to cover Formula One. I've gotten to cover boxing matches, UFC matches, NBA finals, home run derbies. I've gotten to interview actors like Jamie Foxx. I've gotten to interview Dana White, Tyson Fury. I've gotten to see and do some pretty cool things, and it's allowed me to be a bit more versatile. That's my 9 to 5. In English, that's in Spanish. In English, it's Football Americas and ESPNFC, and then, whatever they come up with.
Ahora Nunca, now, never? What was
Now
that?
or never. Now or never, right? In Spanish.
Yeah.
Ahora Nunca, yes. This is we started the show. It moved me back to Los Angeles in 2019. And I just moved back to Connecticut last year because our show, Ahora Nunca, we got a bigger window. We got a bigger studio. We got more of a cast ensemble. So they wanted to bring it back to the mothership.
Yeah. You are born in Southern California, raised in Las Vegas,
Yes,
Mexican-American, comfortable in both English language and Spanish language, comfortable in the U.S., comfortable in Mexico. Are you equally comfortable in all of those worlds? And I guess it's a 2-part question. Equally comfortable, I guess, is a yes or no answer. But how do you meld them? How do you make it work? Because very few people do.
It's interesting because I do feel very comfortable, and I felt very comfortable in both worlds my whole life because that's who I am. It's part of my identity, and I also feel very sometimes equally hated in both worlds. Now, in my line of work, you're going to rub people the wrong way a lot of times because people aren't going to agree with you. It's a situation where you're telling somebody this is what you see, and that person may not see or understand the same thing you see and understand. So they're going to disagree with you. Well, I get that in 2 separate worlds. I get that in multiple languages, and I get that in multiple countries. It became a situation when I first started that it was so taboo to see somebody of the Mexican culture in the United States represent the gringos, so to speak, the U.S., talk ill about Mexican football, that it became like a target, and vice versa. How in the United States, I can speak ill or speak my thoughts about the U.S. men's national team and be seen as an outsider. Like, why are you speaking bad about us? You were here. You're part of us. So at any given moment, it could be a trending topic in two different countries when it comes to the sport. But it's part of my upbringing. If you talk to any Chicano, any Mexican American, at some point in time, they've felt neither here nor there. Ni de aquí ni de allá is a famous saying that we have. We're our own identity, and in that own identity, you feel very comfortable in your own skin in two different cultures.
And how powerful is this constituency in American life, but in this conversation in American soccer? Because I think we know that, but for the folks who don't really pay a lot of attention to that, how powerful is this constituency?
Well, I'd say it's the future, so it's very powerful. And I'd say it's so powerful that any major broadcaster or corporation that looks to sell to a consumer understands this. This is why you will see phone carriers do commercials and it's in Spanish and English. This is why the largest consumer demographic for quite some time has been the Mexican American. There's 70 million Mexican Americans in this country, by far more than any other immigrant in this country. Any other, so they understand this. They see the future. And I think we're starting to see more representation of that on TV screens, as political figures, as leaders in communities. So it's very important.
Let me try this for you. And I'm not pandering and I'm going to embarrass myself, but I'm going to try this because I think it's important. Yo creo es muy importante para personas jóvenes aprender español para tus futuras en la media at the very least. Yes?
Te ayuda muchísimo. Eso sí, John. You did very well. And
Thank
correct me if I'm wrong. You're in California. You've been in California?
I was in California forever. Now I'm in Lincoln. I'm a college professor in Lincoln now.
Okay.
So, but yeah, I spent a lot of time, 37 years in California. Yes.
You can attest to in California at any given moment, you're in situations with people who don't speak English or English very well.
Mm-hmm.
And California, by the extent of California is an extension of Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're in California and you're of Mexican descent, chances are, even if you don't speak fluently in language, you understand the language because that's how you grew up at home. You took orders in Spanish. The more you can educate yourself in language, it's common, knowledge. You're going to have more opportunities in life, especially in the media landscape. I'll give you an example of a colleague of mine, Sebastian Salazar, who was a field reporter for Major League Soccer during the Atlanta United years. Atlanta United is one of the best inaugural seasons or few years of any team in Major League Soccer, and they were very fun to watch. Tata Martino had the greatest show on turf. Joseph Martinez, Miguel Almiron, Tito Villalba, Tata Martino himself, that great team. You can't tell that story. You can't paint that picture. You can't sell this team if you're ESPN or if you're Major League Soccer without a Sebastian Salazar right there, live translations post-game. Miguel Almiron, Joseph Martinez, what makes their partnership so great. Tata Martino, are you going to Mexico? Are you staying here? You can't tell that without somebody like Sebastian Salazar, without how fluent and smooth he is on air to do it like that. You can't. It just doesn't work. So it's vital when your superstars don't speak the language or need help speaking the language to the rest of the world. You need these storytellers. So it's very important.
Yeah. And I don't think young people, and I teach in sports media and broadcasting and journalism, and if you want to work in soccer and want to be good at it as a journalist, you want to work in baseball, you want to work in horse racing, you want to work increasingly in football and other spaces, wrestling and other spaces. Really, more than just perfunctory ability to speak Spanish, I think, is a tiebreaker. And goodness knows, right now in our world, a tiebreaker for a job interview is a really important thing.
Oh, I mean, it's the difference between getting the job or not. Forget tiebreaker. Think about it as how you can make yourself more valuable. It's very. I always say this, whether it's on the field or it's off the field, it's very easy to get in. It's difficult to stick around. It's difficult to stay.
Yeah, yeah. Now, you guys at ESPN, you've been there since 2017. You make this pivot, do a little part-time. Fox trains you, and then ESPN hires you, pretty much, or at least Fox introduces you to this business, and then you go work at ESPN, and you told us about the things you do. But you don't have the World Cup. You don't have Major League Soccer. Do those things matter? And how do you deal with those things in the presentation of what you guys do every day?
Well, as you know, and I'll share a little insight with the viewers. If you don't have rights, it's frustrating as an on-air talent. You don't have the perks. When you have rights, you're behind the curtain. You have all the access to the material you need, the players, the coaches, the teams, the fields, the environment, the ambiance. You're just the extra setting. That's the show. When you don't have that, you've got to paint the picture of the show. You've got to try to get into the heads of the players without talking to the players, the coaches without talking to the coaches. You don't have that access. You don't have the studio set in the stadium. But what I've learned from ESPN is you don't need that. What I've learned from the worldwide leader of sports is you're still ESPN. You're massive. So you have the audience, you have the platform. Let's paint the picture. And what I mean by that is we didn't have World Cup qualifying rights. And I think we were by far the best coverage. We would go to Mexico City. In Mexico City, Azteca Stadium, and they'd rent out apartments, the top of an apartment, the terrace, the rooftop, with the view of Azteca right behind you. So it looks like a massive, massive production. And you're there without actually having to pay the rights of being there. And I learned if you do your job and you can do it well, they're not going to care if they have to switch the channel to go watch your post game. They'd rather go watch your post game. So it's about believing in yourself, believing that you're the worldwide leader, and trying to do as much as you can without actually being there inside.
Yeah, maybe you know more than I do, but as of now, they're keeping the 2030 and 2034 rights to their vest closely, the FIFA. I know Fox wants in, and I know ESPN wants in, and I'm sure there's some other players in the game as well. The women rights have already been
Netflix
given to Netflix for the next couple of rounds, but it's going to be very interesting who gets the rights for the men coming up in the next couple of cycles. I will say, as it goes to the idea that you can talk about them almost more freely in some respects. You don't have the behind the curtain look, but more freely. I worked at a sports radio station in San Francisco for many years, and for most of that time, we did not have the rights to the most popular team in town, the 49ers, but our program director would say, we own this story 6 days a week.
Correct.
We own them 6 days a week, and we get that advantage without paying a dime for those media rights.
Yeah. And you can speak freely. Most media partners, they speak freely to an extent, and I don't want to undermine my colleagues, but it is what it is. You're a partner, so sometimes you can't speak as freely as you'd like. We don't have that at ESPN, and even with the companies we're partners of, ESPN is ESPN. They're going to say what they need to say. We obviously all work for somebody, and you have to be diligent to understand that you represent a company. You can't just go spouting off at the mouth at will. But I've never once been told what to say or not to say. And I think that's very important in this landscape.
We continue our conversation with Herculez coming up in just a minute. Did you know when you join Soccer America, you get a daily soccer on TV schedule delivered to your inbox every morning? It's something I've used for years to keep track of games in my neighborhood, around the country, around the world. You also get expert analysis, insider interviews, and in-depth coverage of the biggest games. Now, you can try it for free at socceramerica.com/free trial. That's socceramerica.com/free trial. And while you're here, check the links in the description to sign up for notifications for when our new episodes drop. Yeah, you work at a place where the men's national team, well, everybody who covers soccer in America is keeping a close eye on the men's national team. And we're recording this in the middle of a cycle with Uruguay and Paraguay. And if we don't make any mention to that, or if we do, just know that this conversation is being recorded during that time. So we don't really have all that detail. But there was a little bit of a tough patch for a while there. And you were pretty critical of the coach, Pochettino. Who's getting the team prepared for its World Cup appearance without the benefit and the burden of having World Cup qualifying games. And I think it really is a benefit, and it's also a burden in some respect. But you weren't afraid to be critical of Pochettino after a series of games, and give me a little bit of an idea of how that worked and how you felt at that time, and if anything's changed since.
So I was very excited for the U.S. men's national team and their future when Mauricio Pochettino was hired. I mean, you went out and you got a coach, top level coach at the club level, that at any given moment, if Manchester United needed a coach, he'd be on the short list. In the Premier League, there was a coaching vacancy in the best league in the world. He would be on a short list. He was just coaching Chelsea. He coached PSG, Kylian Mbappe, Neymar, and Messi's PSG. He did wonders at Spurs. He started something very special at Southampton. Like, you're like, okay, I can see this. This is great. And you reset the market for him. $6 million a year. $6 million a year, one of the highest paid national team coaches in the world. So you should be very excited. But you lost a lot of time in the Greg Berhalter era. The rehiring, everything that went down to Mauricio Pochettino, you're behind the 8 ball. And you say it's a benefit not having World Cup qualifying. Well, the only benefit there is that you're already qualified for the World Cup. What is not a benefit is you're grasping at straws for quality competition. You're really behind the 8 ball in preparation in quality matches. And there was a point in time with Mauricio Pochettino where you had to give him the benefit of the doubt. But then that started going awry where you're like, I don't understand the selection process. I don't understand the tactical formations. I don't understand what he is still looking for and evaluating players so late on. If you followed the U.S. men's national team for the last 4 or 5 years, you know what the pool of players are. Maybe 1 or 2 or 3 players can be added, but the pool of players, the A players, the players that most 99% of people would say will be there, you know what that pool of players is. So as time goes by, you see that not one camp has he had his full A team in. And then along those lines, there's also this ugly public spat with the best player on your national team. There's the Gio Reyna drama. There's the Weston McKennie reports. There's a talk about culture. There's a talk about the fan base. It's just one too many after the other, and there's no results on the field. Nothing for the eye test or on paper in terms of wins, excuse me. So you give Mauricio Pochettino the benefit of the doubt until he's run out of that benefit. And here we are, 4 games in a row that they've not lost against World Cup opposition, which is great, but you still haven't seen what I would say is the A team together. A line of 5 with 3 center backs. You say, okay, those are the 3 center backs. A wing back in Serginho Dest. A left back, whether that's Max Arston or Anthony Robinson, if he could ever get fit. A Tyler Adams in the middle. A Weston McKennie in front of him. 2 10s and a Christian Pulisic and a Giovanni Reyna. A Fowler and Balogun. You've never seen that lineup. So why it's easy to play against teams that have already qualified for the World Cup and they're playing their B teams and they're evaluating players because they went through the qualification process with the majority of that stem, of that depth. You don't have that. So I think it's fair to be critical. U.S. soccer, they've never spent this much money. They've never had a coach like this. But he's a club coach with little national team experience. And he's also a guy that every chance he gets, keeps talking about his ex, the Premier League. And it makes you feel like one and done. He's gone after the World Cup. And the players are going to stick around. The fan base is going to stick around. And what once was, hey, on home soil, you could potentially make a deep run. You could potentially do something special. Now you're just saying, well, they're going to get out of their group and get that game right after, and maybe they win that, but that's going to be probably as far as they go, because they've not had those moments. They've not had that I beat a good team with my A team moment, marquee moment. So I think it's fair to question Mauricio Pochettino. The ultimate test is going to come 8 months from now.
Yeah. And last word on this, but I want to make sure I get this right. Did you say this? I want to choose my words wisely, but this screams of phony snake oil salesman. Did you say that?
I did say that. That was I'm trying to think of when I said that. But you look at the roster selection. You look at how he panders to a crowd. He went on Chiringuito, which is a famous Spanish show in Spain.
In Spain, yeah.
Yes, and he knows how to pander to a crowd.
Yeah.
He's pandering to the Espanyol fans, saying that Espanyol is more of a Catalan club than Barcelona. He's playing to the patriotism there. But then when they ask him about the U.S. men's national team, he's like, hey, I don't score the goals. I don't block the shots.
That's
you know, and at one point he was talking about winning the World Cup. Like, it's just, he panders to a crowd, and so it is what it is.
I'll be forgiven when they win the World Cup, right? He was.
Listen, the margins are so fine at a World Cup.
Right.
To date, John, the best performance of the U.S. men's national team in modern history, because we're not going to go to the third place in the 30s. In modern history, is Bruce Arena's 2002 team.
Quarterfinals, yeah.
Quarterfinals. They shocked Portugal, tied against South Korea, and then almost screwed the pooch versus Poland. They lost to Poland. It was 1-1-1. They were going home until South Korea beats Portugal and backs them back into the second round, where they faced a CONCACAF nation in Mexico, and they made a quarterfinal appearance. But those are the margins.
Yeah.
Everybody talks about the Torsten Frings handball off a Greg Berhalter header that almost got him to a semifinal, because they should have probably won that game if that's called, if VAR is around. But nobody talks about how they almost got grouped.
Right. Yeah.
The margins are so fine. So Mauricio Pochettino and his men, they could have something like that happen, and if they're on the good side of fortune, make a run. It really is about the draw. It really is about the crossover. You can make a run, but the margins are so fine.
Yeah, and trying to understand what are good goals and expectations for this team are a little bit difficult right now in mid-November until the draw is held in December. Do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. Listen, there's this saying, like, if you want to win the World Cup, you got to beat anybody. No, you don't. No, you don't. No, you don't. Listen, if they get the group that Morocco got and the draws that Morocco got, good luck, they're out. Morocco was CONCACAF champion. They won the group. Canada won the group. And then a golden generation in Belgium and a World Cup runner-up in Croatia. And then from there, it was Portugal, Spain, France. You don't want that. You do not want that.
How will the absolute spectacle of this World Cup impact the American team, do you think?
So I've heard Mauricio Pochettino complain a lot about the fan base, and he doesn't understand the culture with the fans in the U.S. The U.S. is not a U.S. men's national team country. It's not a Major League Soccer country. I have a colleague who works with me at Ahora, Nunca, and he's got this take that the U.S. isn't a soccer country, and it's a take that I could not be, further against. The U.S. is absolutely a soccer country. Liga MX does a friendly here, Chivas versus America, and they fill up the Rose Bowl. There are 100,000 people for a friendly at the Rose Bowl. Every year, you have summer friendlies with Manchester United and Liverpool at the Big House, 120,000 people. They fill up stadiums. The Club World Cup, you can see how massive that was. 1994 World Cup, still to date the most successful World Cup in the history of the game. The women, what they do, what they continue to do. The U.S. leads ticket sales and World Cup sales every single year. It is by far a soccer country. It's just not a U.S. men's national team country, and it's not a Major League Soccer country. But what Americans are, they're patriotic. And I follow the Olympics and I root in the Olympics, but I don't watch track and field between that. I only watch it at the Olympics. And I think Americans are going to get behind their team, this team, in the World Cup, but they got to give them something to get behind it. They have to come out and really represent the fan base. They want to feel represented. I've questioned these players, this team, this pool, with Greg Berhalter, with BJ Callahan, Anthony Hudson, their mentality. I question their heart. If American fans are anything, if Americans are anything, it's spirited, it's brave, it's winning mentality. You show them that you can be that, they're going to back you.
Yeah. If there's one thing we know about sports and covering it and marketing it and paying attention to it, is that national identity is the most marketable thing in all of sports. The USA is enough to get a couple 100 million Americans on your side. One final thought, speaking of that, and you are, if not uniquely, you are clearly able to speak to this very deeply. Is the USA versus Mexico men's soccer the greatest rivalry in world sports?
No.
Is it one of?
Not in the top 5.
Okay. Is it a big rivalry?
It is. And I would say it's the most unique rivalry. I mean, you've got 70, 75 million people in your country who identify as Mexican American, who root for, cheer for some of those Mexico. And when you play in your country, the US, against the Mexican national team, you are not the home team. That is unique in any part of the world. That doesn't happen elsewhere. It happens here. It's Colorado, it's New York, if it's Los Angeles, if it's Dallas, whatever the case may be, you are not the home team. That does not happen anywhere else. It is unique in that way, but it's not greater than, it's not going to be greater than Brazil, Argentina. It's not going to be greater than, Scotland, England. It's not going to be greater than England, Germany. It's not going to be greater than, some of the rivalries you would have in Eastern Europe, or in South America, or even in Central America. It's unique. And per its sheer size, 170 million Mexicans and 50 million Americans in sheer size. Yeah, okay. But no, I can't say that it's one of the greatest rivalries. It's a rivalry, absolutely. It's probably the most unique rivalry, but it pales in comparison to some of the world rivalries.
It's the great rivalry closest to home. I'm going to settle on that. How about that?
Yes.
Great. Herculez, thanks so much. I appreciate it. It's always a pleasure, and I appreciate your candor, and congratulations on everything that's going on, and good luck to ESPN in the World Cup negotiating rights. So
yeah, let's hope it's a fair one. I appreciate it, John.
Yeah, well, the illusion is that to the fact that the last couple were not fair, according to almost everybody who pays attention to that. Herculez Gomez with us this time around on the Soccer Media Podcast. Once again, thanks so much to Herculez Gomez. Before we go, we better get that trivia question answer from Mike Waitala.
Today's Soccer America trivia quiz was, which of the 22 men's World Cups did not have a final championship game? The answer is in 1950, when the last game of the tournament wasn't regarded as a final because it was the last game of a 4-team group stage. Because Uruguay had tied Spain and Brazil had beaten Spain earlier in that group stage, Brazil only needed a tie to win its first World Cup. But, of course, Uruguay famously won 2-1.
If you're looking to stay on top of the game, check out Soccer America. Members get the daily Soccer on TV schedule and a daily digest of the top soccer stories in their inbox every morning, plus coverage of the biggest matches. You can go to socceramerica.com/free trial. That's socceramerica.com/free trial for a free 30-day trial of Soccer America. And while you're here, click like and subscribe and check the links in the description to get notified when new episodes drop. And that wraps up this episode of our show. For Mike Woitala, I'm John Shrader. We'll see you next time on the Soccer Media Podcast.